Woman saves pregnant lioness, but she didn't expect the lion's reaction. Dr. Victoria Hayes's gloved hands trembled slightly as she pressed the stethoscope against the lioness's distended abdomen. The massive male lion, standing just 10 feet away, hadn't moved, but his amber eyes remained fixed on Victoria, tracking her every movement with unnerving intensity. One wrong move, one unexpected sound, and Victoria knew her life could end in seconds. "Easy, girl," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the constant chirping of insects in the dry Namibian savanna. "I'm trying to help you." The sedated lioness, a magnificent specimen they'd been tracking for their conservation study, lay on her side, her breathing shallow but stable. What had started as a routine health check and collar replacement had quickly become something far more complex when Victoria discovered the lioness was pregnant and showing signs of distress. James Wong, the team's veterinary assistant, maintained his position several yards back, tranquilizer rifle ready. "Victoria, this is insane," he hissed. "That male should be darted too." "Protocol says we can't risk another sedation," Victoria interrupted, not taking her eyes off her patient, not with her condition, and darting him might stress her further. "He's chosen to stay, so we work with it." The male lion, whom the research team had named Zuri, was the dominant male of this small pride. Against all expectations, he had circled their vehicles when they darted the lioness, but instead of fleeing, he'd settled into a watchful position nearby. More remarkably, he'd allowed the researchers to approach the sedated female, behavior virtually unheard of among wild lions. The Namib Desert Lion Conservation Project had been Victoria's life for the past 7 years. After leaving her comfortable position at the London Zoo, she dedicated herself to studying and protecting these rare, desert-adapted lions, one of the most endangered big cat populations on the planet. With fewer than 150 individuals remaining, every pregnancy, every cub was critical to their survival. The lioness, they called her Safi, was one of their most closely monitored subjects. The tracking collar data had shown her movement patterns changing over the past few weeks, and when they'd spotted her from the air looking lethargic, Victoria had made the decision to investigate. Now, with her hands on Safi's abdomen, she could feel the problem. "There's something wrong with one of the cubs," she said quietly. "I can feel unusual positioning. She may need intervention." James's expression tightened. "We're not equipped for an emergency cesarean in the field, Victoria." "I know," Victoria continued her examination, acutely aware of Zuri's unwavering stare. "But I think we can administer medications to help. The pregnancy is advanced, but not full-term. If we can stabilize her and get her through the next few weeks." Her voice trailed off as Zuri suddenly rose to his feet. Both researchers froze. The male lion stretched, his massive muscles rippling beneath his tawny coat, then took several deliberate steps closer. At 6 years old and over 400 pounds, he was in his prime, capable of killing a human with a single swipe of his paw. "Don't move," James whispered slowly, raising the rifle. "No!" Victoria raised her hand slightly. "Wait!" Something in the lion's behavior wasn't registering as aggression. His ears remained forward, his movements deliberate but not predatory. He approached until he was standing directly over the sedated lioness, his mane almost brushing Victoria's arm. The researcher held her breath, fighting every instinct to flee. Zuri lowered his head, sniffing at the lioness, then raised his eyes to meet Victoria's gaze. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, woman and predator stared at each other. Then, in a movement that would later be dissected and debated by wildlife behaviorists worldwide, the lion stepped back and sat down, as if granting permission for the treatment to continue. "I've never seen anything like this," James breathed, the rifle still trained on the male. "This isn't normal behavior, Victoria." Victoria nodded slightly, returning her attention to Safi. Nothing about these desert lions is normal. That's what makes them special. Working with careful precision, Victoria prepared a series of injections, antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, and supplements to support the developing cubs. The medication might be enough to help Safi's body correct the problematic pregnancy naturally. We'll need to monitor her closely, she said, administering the final injection. The drugs will start reversing the sedation soon. We should back off before she wakes. As if understanding the words, Zuri rose and moved closer to his mate, positioning himself between the humans and the lioness. The message was clear. Their time was up. The researchers retreated to their vehicles, equipment packed in record time. As they pulled away, Victoria watched through binoculars as the lioness began showing signs of waking. Zuri remained at her side, occasionally nudging her with his muzzle. "Will she make it?" James asked as they bounced across the rugged terrain back toward their research camp. Victoria's expression was grim. "If the medications work, maybe. But if she needs more intervention..." She left the sentence unfinished. They both knew the challenges of wildlife medicine in remote locations. Back at camp, Victoria documented the extraordinary encounter while the rest of the small research team reviewed the footage they'd captured. Their project director, Dr. Amara Osei, studied the video with growing amazement. "This behavior defies everything we know about wild lion interactions with humans," she said, replaying the sequence where Zuri stood directly over Victoria, particularly from a dominant male with a vulnerable female. "He should have attacked or fled. There's something special about this pride," Victoria replied. "They've adapted to survive in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Maybe that's changed more than just their physical traits." That night, sleep eluded Victoria. She lay in her tent, replaying the encounter in her mind. The lion's eyes had held something she couldn't explain, an intelligence, an awareness that went beyond animal instinct. After years studying these creatures, Victoria had learned to read their behaviors, to anticipate their reactions. But today had shattered her understanding. At dawn, she made a decision that violated every protocol in their research handbook. "I'm going back out there," she announced over breakfast. Dr. Osei set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. "Absolutely not. We'll assemble a proper team and check on her status via drone first." "There's no time," Victoria insisted. "And if she's struggling with the pregnancy, every hour counts, and a full team might drive Zuri away. He's tolerated me before." "That's exactly the kind of thinking that gets conservationists killed, Victoria," James interjected. "One unusual encounter doesn't mean you formed some mystical bond with a wild predator." But Victoria couldn't shake the connection she'd felt. After heated debate, a compromise was reached. Victoria would approach the area with James and a security escort, assess the situation from a safe distance with drones, and only proceed closer with unanimous agreement from the team. What they discovered upon reaching the lion's location left even the skeptical security officer speechless. Zuri was pacing agitatedly around Safi, who lay on her side, visibly laboring hours or days before her due date. The medications hadn't been enough. "She's in distress," Victoria said, lowering the binoculars. "The cubs are coming early." James studied the video feed from their drone, hovering at a safe height above the lions. "Zuri seems agitated, but not aggressive, more like concerned." The security officer, a former game warden named Kwame Mensah, shook his head in disbelief. "In 20 years working with wildlife, I've never seen a male lion behave this way. He should be far from the birthing site." In most lion prides, males typically distance themselves during birth, sometimes not seeing the cubs for weeks. Zuri's behavior was anomalous in every respect. Victoria made a rapid assessment of their options. The lioness was clearly struggling with a difficult labor. Without intervention, She might lose the entire litter, a devastating blow to the already endangered population, but approaching a laboring lioness with an agitated male nearby violated every safety protocol in wildlife management. "I'm going in," she said finally. "Moi, if we don't help her now, we'll lose her and the cubs." "This is suicide, Victoria," James protested. "At least let us dart Zuri first." No. The stress of a dart hitting him could make him charge, and the sound might push Safi into further distress. "He's allowed me near her before. I think he understands. We're trying to help." The conviction in Victoria's voice silenced further objections. With grim efficiency, they prepared a field kit with obstetrical supplies, medications, and emergency equipment. Victoria would approach alone, with James and Kwame providing cover from a distance with tranquilizer rifles. A last resort if things went catastrophically wrong. The sun beat down mercilessly as Victoria drove the jeep to within 100 yards of the lions, then continued on foot. Her heart hammered against her ribs, mouth dry with fear, despite her outward calm. Everything she knew about predator behavior screamed that this approach was foolhardy. Zuri spotted her immediately. The massive lion rose to his full height, his golden eyes locking onto Victoria's. The researcher stopped, establishing visual contact while maintaining a non-threatening posture. After what seemed an eternity, Zuri did something astonishing. He moved several paces away from Safi, creating a path for Victoria to approach. "I'm coming to help," Victoria said softly, not because the lion could understand her words, but because the calm tone might help convey her non-threatening intentions. Step by cautious step, she approached the laboring lioness. Safi's breathing was labored, her flanks heaving with unproductive contractions. Victoria could see immediately that something was wrong with the positioning of the cubs. She set down her medical kit and pulled on obstetrical gloves, every movement slow and deliberate. Zuri circled restlessly, occasionally emitting low growls, but made no move to attack. Through the radio earpiece, Victoria could hear James's tense commentary to the base camp team watching via the drone feed. "He's allowing direct access to the female. Zuri is maintaining approximately 5 meters distance. This is unprecedented behavior." Victoria tuned out the voices, focusing entirely on Safi. A careful examination confirmed her fears. The first cub was malpositioned, blocking the birth canal. Without intervention, neither mother nor cubs would survive. Drawing on years of veterinary training, Victoria worked with gentle precision to reposition the first cub. The lioness growled in discomfort, despite her exhaustion, but seemed to understand on some level that this intrusion was necessary. "That's it, girl," she murmured, feeling the tiny life shift into the correct position. "Now you can help push." As if understanding, Safi's next contraction was stronger, more purposeful. Within minutes, the first cub emerged, tiny, wet, and impossibly vulnerable. Victoria quickly cleared its airways and placed it near Safi's head. The lioness immediately began licking the newborn, stimulating its breathing and circulation. Zuri approached cautiously, sniffing the new arrival with surprising gentleness. Rather than displaying the infanticidal behavior sometimes seen in male lions encountering cubs for the first time, he seemed protective, positioning himself to shield both mother and cub from potential threats while still allowing Victoria to continue her work. 3 more cubs followed, each delivered with Victoria's careful assistance. The final one, the smallest, wasn't breathing. Working swiftly, Victoria cleared its tiny airways and performed gentle chest compressions with her fingertips. For a heart-stopping moment, the cub remained still. Then, with a barely audible squeak, it gasped and began to breathe. We've got 4 healthy cubs," Victoria reported through her radio, the relief evident in her voice. 3 females and a male. Safi is stable." The successful birth intervention would have been remarkable enough in a controlled setting like a zoo, In the wild, with minimal equipment and a fully conscious male lion standing guard, it was nothing short of miraculous. As Victoria backed away, giving the new family space, Zuri did something that the watching researchers would debate for years to come. The male lion approached Victoria directly, his massive head level with the kneeling woman's. Every instinct screamed at Victoria to avoid eye contact, to back away, to run. Instead, she remained perfectly still as the lion came within inches of her face. Zuri's breath was hot against Victoria's skin as the predator seemed to study her. Then, in a gesture that defied explanation, the lion briefly pressed his forehead against Victoria's shoulder before turning back to his mate and cubs. The contact lasted only seconds, but it sent shockwaves through Victoria. In lions' social behavior, head-rubbing was a sign of acceptance, of family bonding. What had just happened transcended normal animal-human interactions. "Did you all see that?" James's voice crackled through the earpiece. All professional detachment gone. He marked you as part of his pride. Victoria retreated slowly to the vehicle, her mind struggling to process what had occurred. Back at camp, the team reviewed the footage in stunned silence. Dr. Osei finally broke the quiet. "What we witnessed today challenges everything we understand about lion behavior," she said. The trust displayed by both lions, particularly Zuri, suggests cognitive processes we haven't properly documented in wild populations. Or maybe it's simpler than that, Victoria suggested, still processing the day's events. Maybe they remember. Safi has worn our tracking collars for years. We've darted her for health checks, always without harming her. Perhaps they've learned we're not a threat. That doesn't explain Zuri's behavior toward you specifically, James pointed out. He singled you out for acceptance. The question is why? The team established a monitoring schedule, setting up observation posts at a respectful distance to track the new family's progress without intrusion. For the next week, Victoria observed from afar as Safi nursed her cubs and Zuri maintained a protective perimeter around his growing family. On the 8th day after the birth, Victoria was recording data when movement caught her attention. Zuri was approaching the observation vehicle directly, something the big cats rarely did without provocation. "Stay in the vehicle," she instructed her research assistant, a young Namibian student named Thabo. "So don't make any sudden movements." Zuri stopped about 20 yards from the jeep, staring directly at Victoria through the windshield. Then the lion turned, took several steps away, and looked back, a gesture unmistakably similar to the way lionesses move their cubs from one location to another. "I think he wants us to follow him," Victoria said incredulously. "That's not possible," Thabo replied, though his voice held uncertainty. "Lions don't communicate with humans that way. Maybe this one does." Against protocol but following her instincts, Victoria started the engine and followed at a distance as Zuri led them across the savannah. After approximately half a mile, the reason became clear. One of the female cubs had somehow become separated from the pride and was stranded on a rock outcropping, crying pitifully, too frightened or inexperienced to find her way down. "He's brought us to his cub," Victoria whispered in amazement. "He's asking for help." The implications were staggering. If Zuri had indeed deliberately sought human assistance for his offspring, it represented a level of cognitive reasoning rarely documented in wild predators. It suggested not just memory and association, but abstract problem-solving and interspecies communication. After careful assessment, Victoria made another calculated risk. With Thabo documenting every moment on video, she slowly exited the vehicle, maintaining eye contact with Zuri. The lion watched, showing no signs of aggression, as Victoria approached the stranded cub. The tiny lioness, barely larger than a house cat at just over a week old, hissed weakly as Victoria reached for her. With gentle hands, she lifted the cub, supporting her body as she carried her down from the rocks. Once on level ground, she knelt and placed her gently on the sand. Zuri approached immediately, inspecting his offspring with careful sniffs. Apparently satisfied with her condition, he picked the cub up by the scruff of her neck and looked directly at Victoria once more before carrying her away toward where Safi and the other cubs were presumably waiting. "And did that really just happen?" Thabo asked, his voice barely above a whisper as they watched the lion disappear into the brush. "It did," Victoria confirmed, her own mind reeling with the implications. "And we have it all on video." The footage of both the birth intervention and the cub rescue quickly became the subject of intense interest within the conservation community. Dr. Osei insisted on a carefully controlled release of information, wary of sensationalism that might disrupt their research or, worse, attract trophy hunters to the area. "We need to understand what's happening here before we share this with the world," she cautioned during a team meeting. "These lions are displaying behaviors that challenge our current understanding of wild predator cognition." Over the following months, the research team documented a series of interactions that further confounded conventional wisdom about lion behavior. Zuri and Safi not only tolerated the researchers' presence, but appeared to actively seek it out at times. The cubs, growing rapidly under their parents' protection, became accustomed to the observation vehicles and equipment. Victoria, though careful to maintain scientific objectivity, couldn't deny the unique connection that had formed. When she was present, Zuri would often approach closer than with other team members, sometimes bringing his cubs within viewing distance, as if deliberately introducing them. "It's almost like he's imprinted on you," James remarked after one such encounter. "And like he's decided you're a strange-looking, relatively harmless member of his extended pride." 6 months after the birth, the team faced a new crisis. Poachers had been detected on the periphery of the lion's territory, their tracks and camera evidence suggesting they were specifically targeting the desert lion population. With fewer than 150 individuals remaining, each lion lost represented a significant blow to the species. Survival. The Namibian government had increased anti-poaching patrols, but the vast, remote territory made comprehensive coverage impossible. The research team found themselves in the dual role of scientists and de facto guardians for the lions they studied. "We need to relocate the pride," Dr. Osei announced after reports of poachers came within 5 miles of the lion's current position. "At least temporarily, until the immediate threat is neutralized." Moving wild lions was notoriously difficult and dangerous, typically requiring helicopters, multiple vehicles, and a large team of wildlife management professionals. The stress alone could be deadly, particularly for the cubs, now half-grown but still vulnerable. "There might be another way," Victoria suggested, "one that doesn't involve darting the entire family." Her proposal was unprecedented: to use the trust they'd established, particularly her connection with Zuri, to guide the pride voluntarily to a safer area. The team was skeptical, to put it mildly. "You want to lead a family of wild lions across 15 miles of desert like some kind of lion whisperer?" James asked incredulously. "This isn't a Disney movie, Victoria." "I'm not suggesting they'll follow me like trained dogs," Victoria clarified. "But we've established enough trust that they might follow our vehicles if we move slowly and they perceive us as leading them away from danger." After heated debate, with time running short and poacher activity increasing, Dr. Osei reluctantly approved a modified version of the plan. They would attempt Victoria's approach first, with a full capture team on standby if it failed. The operation began at dawn. Victoria and James positioned their vehicle near the pride's current location, where Zuri, Safi, and the cubs were resting after a night hunt. Using the familiar sound of their specific vehicle, which the lions had come to associate with non-threatening human presence, they attracted the pride's attention. "Easy, does it?" Victoria murmured as Zuri approached the jeep, his expression alert, but not hostile. "Ugo, we need to get you all somewhere safer, big guy." Slowly, they began driving away, stopping frequently to allow the lions to follow at their own pace. To the team's amazement, Zuri seemed to understand. He watched the vehicle, then turned to Safi and the cubs, vocalizing in what appeared to be direction. The lioness gathered the cubs and began following, with Zuri taking up a protective position at the rear. The journey took 3 days, with the research team maintaining constant vigilance for poachers or other threats. They traveled mainly at dawn and dusk, respecting the lions' natural activity patterns. Throughout the slow procession, Zuri remained remarkably attentive to Victoria's vehicle, occasionally approaching during rest periods as if checking in. When they finally reached the designated safe area, a remote section of the conservation zone with natural barriers that would make poacher access more difficult, the pride seemed to understand they had arrived. Zuri led his family to a suitable denning area, and within hours they had begun establishing their new territory. "I still can't believe that worked," Dr. Ose admitted, reviewing the footage of their unprecedented journey. "In 30 years of wildlife conservation, I've never seen anything like it." 2 weeks later, with the pride settled into their new range and anti-poaching efforts successfully driving the hunters from the region, Victoria made a difficult decision. She requested a 6-month leave from the project, citing the need for objectivity in their ongoing research. "I'm too personally involved now," she explained to the team. "For the data to remain scientifically valid, we need to observe how the pride behaves without my presence, whether this unusual bond is specific to me or represents a broader adaptation in how these lions interact with humans." The morning of her departure was harder than she'd anticipated. Victoria made one final visit to an observation point overlooking the pride's new territory. As if sensing her presence, Zuri appeared on a nearby ridge, the morning sun illuminating his magnificent mane. For several minutes, woman and lion regarded each other across the distance. No scientific training had prepared Victoria for the emotion she felt. A connection that transcended species, forged through mutual trust in moments of life and death. She wouldn't anthropomorphize. These were wild predators, not pets or friends in the human sense. And yet something profound had occurred, something that challenged humanity's understanding of the complex cognitive and emotional lives of the creatures with whom we share this planet. Zuri eventually turned away, disappearing into the landscape that his ancestors had roamed for countless generations. Victoria knew the lion would continue protecting his family, hunting and living according to his nature. But he had also demonstrated something remarkable, an ability to recognize allies across the species barrier, to accept help when needed, and, perhaps most surprisingly, to offer trust to beings his instincts should have identified only as threats. The research continued in Victoria's absence, with the team documenting the pride's progress and development. The 4 cubs thrived, growing into healthy sub-adult lions that would eventually contribute to the recovery of their endangered population. Zuri and Safi maintained their unusual tolerance for the research vehicles, though none of the other scientists experienced the same level of direct interaction that Victoria had. 6 months later, when Victoria returned to the project, the question on everyone's mind was whether the lions, particularly Zuri, would remember her or recognize her differently from the other researchers. The answer came on her 3rd day back in the field. Victoria was alone in an observation vehicle when Zuri appeared on a nearby hill. The lion paused, scenting the air, then began approaching directly. Victoria remained still, camera recording as the massive predator came within yards of the vehicle. Zuri circled once, then sat down, his gaze fixed on Victoria with that same inscrutable intensity from their first encounter. After several minutes, the lion rose and made a soft chuffing sound, a vocalization typically used between lions in social bonding before turning to leave. As he walked away, Zuri stopped once to look back, as if ensuring Victoria was watching. Then the lion continued on to where his family waited, his role as their protector unchanged, but his understanding of the world and its inhabitants perhaps forever expanded by the unusual alliance he had formed with a human who had once saved his mate and cubs. The story of Victoria Hayes and the desert lions of Namibia would eventually be documented in scientific journals, nature documentaries, and conservation literature. But beyond the data and analysis lay a simple truth that resonated with all who heard it. Sometimes, across the seemingly insurmountable barriers of species, language, and instinct, understanding can emerge. And in that understanding lies hope, for lions, for humans, and for the fragile web of life that connects us all.